Welcome to another edition of The Modern Athlete. Today's guest is Sam Kovarsky. He's the owner and founder of Science Over Tradition LLC, which is an affiliate of K&K Training right here in Fairfield, Connecticut. Sam is a certified strength and conditioning coach. He used to be an assistant strength and conditioning coach at UCLA. He was also the head strength and conditioning coach at Springfield College before that. Sam trains and coaches kids in nutrition and training at K&K Training right here in Fairfield, Connecticut. Today, Sam's going to tell us a little bit about nutrition, training, creatine, protein powder, and all that kind of stuff, and just answer some questions that high schoolers usually have about training, nutrition, and recruiting. Please welcome Sam Kovarsky to the Modern Athlete Podcast. Tell me about Science Over Tradition a little bit, and just tell me a little about your background and how that kind of all got started.
With Science Over Tradition, I started it back in 2018 when I was at UCLA. So just to preface this, I'll give you a little bit of my background first, and then I'll kind of let you know how Science Over Tradition got started. So started my coaching career, played college football, transitioned into teaching, which kind of led to an opportunity coaching. I was doing some personal training at the same time and doing a little side hustle there. And my high school football team needed a strength coach or somebody to help lead the strength and conditioning program because nobody was in the weight room. It wasn't like a job or a thing. It wasn't paid. So I ended up taking over that role. I knew a little bit about training. That was my favorite thing to do as an athlete was train, the summer training programs, and then continuing throughout the year, 5 o'clock in the morning before school. It's something that like pretty much every high school athlete does, or at least in my mind that they did at that point in time. So we ended up having a really, really successful high school football team. And I think that a lot of that stemmed from the training and the culture that we had created. And I didn't know a whole ton, but I continued to learn and pursue everything that I possibly could at the time about strength and conditioning, how to organize a program properly. I looked to some really high-level people in the field and just did my own research and started to put together this really good program. Anyway, I started in 2009, or 2008 was my first year with the JV team. And then I started in 2009 with the whole program. And this thing kind of blew up. And we had everybody participating. We had a really, really good turnout. And I'm from Long Island. This was Lawrence High School. So it has a really good reputation as being a good football school. But there was never any really organized strength and conditioning program. So this really took off. Everybody bought in. The kids really, to their credit, busted their ass every single day, worked so hard, did everything I asked them to. And we ended up winning multiple Long Island championships. We ended up having a lot of kids go on to play college football, which isn't we get 2 or 3, but this was a lot more kids. This was 8, 9, 10. In 2012, my final year there, we ended up winning the Long Island championship, got ranked number 1 in New York State, won the Rutgers Cup for the best team overall on Long Island. We were a Conference 3 school. This is for every school. So it's a pretty big accomplishment. Had the number 1 player in New York State. And at that time, I realized I wanted to transition to the college level. And I wanted to see what this was like. So I interned at Fordham over the course of the summer and the fall. And I made a connection there that gave me an opportunity at South Carolina and got an opportunity to do a strength and conditioning internship there. Started to build this resume a little bit where I was a hard worker, got a chance to go to UCLA, do another internship, kind of going all around the country, working with some really high quality programs, learning from some really good coaches, and made a transition to Springfield College in Massachusetts. So if you know anything about Springfield College, it's known for strength and conditioning, for being the coaching cradle. A lot of great coaches come out of there. If you look at the list of alumni and where are they now, I think it's like 200 or 300 names of just all Division I, all NBA, NFL, MLB strength coaches. In my class alone, in the grad program, we had 5 or 6 of our students out of about 10 go Division I, get Division I jobs. So, there's an expectation when you go to Springfield that you're going to be the best in the industry when it comes to strength and conditioning, and there's really a high standard to uphold. And with that being said, I went back to UCLA, not getting paid after I graduated Springfield because that was my dream job. There was a performance nutrition coordinator opportunity under the strength and conditioning team. So I was there as a strength coach, but they needed this niche to be filled. And at Springfield, I had an opportunity to work with all the athletes from a nutrition standpoint. So I continued to build this curriculum for athletes that was built around nutrition and that tied in directly with strength and conditioning. So a lot of times you'll see that there's like a registered dietitian on staff. But to be honest with you, I've seen a lot of them, and none of them have this good relationship with football players. There's always an awkward kind of standard that's held, because it's a little bit uncomfortable for these RDs who don't have a background in athletics, for the most part, to hold these players accountable. And if you go into, any Division I school, it's a little bit intimidating at first to tell people that you need things done a certain way, and that's kind of something you have to build. But I was able to do that over time and really implement this nutrition program cohesively into the strength and conditioning program. In 2017, at the end of the year, unfortunately, the staff that I was on got fired. So my mentor, somebody who was really close to me, and the rest of the team in the strength and conditioning program got fired. And we didn't know who was coming on. We were like, who's the next head coach? It was kind of crazy for a little while. And then we found out that Chip Kelly was going to be the next head coach. So if you're familiar with Chip Kelly, you know that he was a head coach at Oregon. He was the head coach for the Eagles, head coach for the 49ers. And he has this reputation as being a sports science guru. So he's really, really involved heavily in that. It's important to him. There's probably no better coach in the country to work for if you're in strength and conditioning than Coach Kelly, because he really learns it. He wants to know the science behind it. And if you're going to sit there and talk, you better know what you're talking about, because you can't go in there and kind of slip up, because he can pick right up on it. He's a very, very intelligent individual. So anyway, long story short, we knew the whole staff was going to be let go. One day we had one of the assistants come down. He said, Coach Kelly wants to know who handles the nutrition on staff. And they were like, Sam, you got to go talk to him. So I'm sitting there, and I wasn't expecting it. I was like, oh shit, like I have to go talk to Coach Kelly one-on-one right now. Nobody else had really talked to him. It was a little bit weird because we had the old staff in the building, and he would come through, pass through the weight room, say hi to everybody, but nobody had really talked to him much other than that. So, hey man, I got 5 minutes with him, and I explained to him why we did our nutrition the way we did it, why I thought it was the absolute best program in the country. I'd seen what a lot of other programs were doing, and it was the traditional, like, let's get them Gatorade bars, Gatorade shakes, let's make our training table, this, that, the other thing, and try to hold players accountable by having an RD stand there. And I was like, no, that's not how we do things here. And this is from my experience in building relationships with the players and just having a better understanding of what needs to be accomplished in order to have a successful program. So anyway, about a month later, after our bowl game, got a call from Coach, and he said, hey, we want to keep you on staff. Everybody else was let go. I was able to stay on, and I spent a year, putting together the program, the whole nutrition program, being a strength coach on staff and learning from a new staff that had come on, which is a little bit weird at times because it's a whole different philosophy, but I made the most of it. And the more I continued to learn, the more I was like, hey, I need to look into some of what I'm doing at a deeper level. I wanted to learn more about the musculoskeletal system. I wanted to learn more about biochemistry and nutrition, how that ties together. Wanted to learn more about functional medicine. So anyway, that's when Science Over Tradition started. And I had this one client in LA who I was training while I was at the football facility. And she's a CEO of a really, really prominent dairy-free, gluten-free, healthy ice cream sort of company. She was a rower at Boston University. And I was doing pretty well training her on my own. So I said, hey, if I can do well training her on my own, am I going to have basically the balls to leave college football, my dream job? And I posted pictures of the facility that we're in, and it's insane. Like in LA, 80 degrees, 70 degrees every day, doors open up, all power lift equipment. So did I really have the balls to leave my dream job and go into the private sector and then pursue chiropractic, which is what I'm doing right now while I'm running this business? And to me, I truly felt that I was going to invest in myself, and that's what I did. I said, I'm going to make the decision to start this company, and I'm going to go to school at the same time, and that's kind of where I'm at right now. So the idea, back to your original question, sorry for the really long answer, the idea behind Science Over Tradition, how we got here, was that I wanted to integrate a really high quality training program, fueling program, and eventually recovery program where we're gonna tie in chiropractic modalities, spinal manipulation to other joints, and then soft tissue work into this one integrated program to help athletes reach their potential. Because a lot of the stuff that I'm seeing now is just there's a very low bar set and not really any evidence-based approach to doing what's being done. So I really felt that I could set a higher standard for the way that people approach this performance model. And there's no better place to do that than when it comes to high school athletics. I mean, you see kids who come in who are like 140 pounds in 8th grade and leave, 220. It's a huge growing period, and there's so much to be done right. If you look at the amount of sessions that you could do over the course of the year at a minimum, training-wise, you could hit about 208 sessions if you're training on a consistent basis, about 2 times a week. You look at that over the course of 4 years, that's over 600 sessions or 600 opportunities to make improvements in your training and really get the most out of it. But at the same time, I know when I was in high school, I did so much garbage work. It was so much extra stuff that probably wasn't in my best interest. But in my mind, I was like, hey, I need to work harder. I need to work harder. I need to be better than the next guy. When if you look at the science, that's not the best approach. So I wanted to find a way to quantify things and really approach this in an objective manner so that I could show high school athletes that we can get results without doing extra stuff that's really unnecessary and not going to have the best output on performance in the game.
Football players to be training, or like, what do you think like a typical training week should look like for football players?
Yeah, so 2 times a week was the minimum. So I was saying, how crazy is that? At a minimum, if you train 2 times a week, that's 208 sessions over the course of the year. That's over 600 sessions in 4 years, right? So if you look at 4 times a week, I don't know, we could do the math together, but in my opinion, depending on if this is in season or out of season, 4 times a week is going to be a really good way to build a strong foundation. And if you're looking at this 4-year period, you want to make sure that during the first year at least, you're able to do everything perfectly when it comes to executing things from a form standpoint. So that means full range of motion, all the ground-based 3-dimensional movements. That's absolutely required. If you're trying to improve that and you're seeing quantifiable jumps, then you have a foundation built. And you can move on to more explosive movements that are going to be an expression of that strength that you've developed. 4 times a week would be a great start. If you want to move to 3 times a week in the second 2 years after you have that base, that's great as well. There are definitely 2 ways of doing it. I think for football players, anything less than 3 times a week is not going to get you the results that you need. And for me, breaking up the program into 4 12-week phases throughout the year with a 13th week of recovery where you're not in the gym, you're getting out of the gym to actually have muscle growth and strength growth during that time is going to be so important. So if you look at the year as a 4-tier block, you have 4 12-week phases, and within each of those phases is going to be a specific training goal. And you're actually going to try to quantify either muscle mass gains or strength gains during that time period. And being able to do that is going to be where you figure out whether or not a program's working for you. So you could say like, hey, I did all this thing. Great. Can you show me your development in an exercise selection, or can you show it to me from a body composition standpoint? And I really feel that those measurements are going to be indicative of the quality of work that you put in, year in, year out.
Yeah, you talked about training like from the high school kids coming in at like 140 and leaving like 220. I came into high school when I was in 9th grade. I was like 135, and now just finishing up, like senior season. Now it's like in the spring, and I'm about to go off to college. I weigh about like 215. So a lot of kids struggle to gain weight, like just because either they're not eating enough or just their metabolism too fast, or they think they're eating enough but they're really not. From a nutrition perspective, how do you think kids should go about that and trying to put on muscle and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think this is one of the biggest issues that we run into, because everybody, especially at the skill position where you're going to find the kids with a smaller frame, and they're trying to put on all this weight because it's so valuable to get to whatever weight that they come up with arbitrarily in their mind that they need to be at. When really the reality of it is, you need to identify the type of weight that you're putting on, because if you're a skill athlete, and I think that's kind of who you're referring to in this case, for the most part, because you don't find too many linemen that are like, hey, I need to gain a tremendous amount of weight. It could happen. There are some smaller linemen, but for the most part, this tends to be the skilled athlete. So what you'll see a lot is that they'll start eating whatever is in front of them, whatever they can, in order to gain this weight for no particular reason. Research is pretty clear that if you're gaining fat mass over the course of time, there's going to be a reduction in force production. What that means is you're not going to jump as high and you're not going to run as fast. So you have to really keep the end goal in mind. If the end goal is to get better at football, then increasing skeletal muscle mass is going to be the most important thing. And that's why we do body composition, because if you're not measuring the type of weight that you're putting on, you could be putting on, and in a lot of cases, you probably are putting on useless weight. And you see kids all the time, and I did it in high school. I was trying to drink all these weight gainer shakes and everything. If you're not measuring, you're not necessarily giving yourself the best chance to be successful. And with an increase in body fat is going to come a very heightened risk of injury. And the best type of ability is availability. So if you're putting on garbage weight, it's not going to be too productive to your overall health and your overall ability in competition. So again, that's why we go back and we measure. So if I'm working with somebody in the 9th grade, we're going to take a measurement day 1 of 9th grade, and we're going to see where you're at, and we're going to watch the progression. But again, it doesn't happen overnight, and you have so much time in high school to develop. If you think about it, if you put on a half a pound every week linearly for an entire year, you're going to gain over 25 pounds. Think about that. And people are so quick to try to gain 10 pounds in a week. You have to take your time. You have to progress it. And there are things that we need to look at from an appetite awareness standpoint, to a supplementation standpoint, to a food quality standpoint. All these things are going to tie in together to provide the best possible outcome for you. And it doesn't need to be rushed. You don't need to be crushing, 2 pizzas a night. Or like, I remember I tried to do that. I remember getting advice where it was like, eat as much pizza as you can and then go to sleep. And that's the best way to gain weight. And it was ridiculous. Like, it was crazy. And there's just so much misinformation out there and misguided protocols that you need to at least have some type of measurement to figure out if this is going to work for you. Another thing that I like to utilize is called frame score. And that basically looks at the amount of weight that you can safely hold based on your bone size or the radius or diameter when we take measurements. So if you're a high school lineman, right, and you're trying to go Division I, and your knee is 15 inches, and you're trying to gain all this weight, the reality is, based on the data at the Division I level, there is a very slim chance that you're going to be able to safely put on the weight necessary to achieve that goal. So that might lead to a redirection in the position that you need to try to aim for in order to get to this high-level Division I school, or even like an FCS or FBS school. So it's something we look at early on, and then try to direct our goals based off of those frame scores. And yes, you can definitely grow, but you're going to get a really good idea in the 9th and 10th grade of what your ability to put on mass is. We try to do that safely and effectively. The program is tailored toward that.
Talking about supplementation a little bit, a lot of people are told to start drinking protein powder, like protein shakes and that kind of stuff. What do you think about protein powder in general, and how do you think that plays a role into like athletics and nutrition?
I mean, protein powder is going to be really, really important, and supplements, in my opinion, are really, really important. But you have to keep in mind, they're a supplement to what you're consuming on a daily basis. So if you're putting in garbage food on a regular basis, and you're eating fast food and all this stuff, and you're trying to supplement protein and supplement creatine, supplement all these cool things that they have at GMC or that you see online or bought off Instagram, like, hey, it's not going to get you where you need to be. You need to get the foundational tools down first, and then you can utilize, the supplements that are appropriate for your particular situation. And that's going to be different for everybody. For athletes, having a whey protein shake after a workout, yes, that's going to be great. But if you're using that as a crutch to help kind of compensate for all the other things that you're not getting right, it's not going to work. You need to do everything else effectively and then utilize protein on top of that. And when it comes to protein, in my opinion, quality is going to be the number one factor. And I always recommend for athletes, grass-fed whey protein, because it's going to be absorbed at a higher level. You're going to be able to have a better digestive availability of it. And if you don't absorb it, then you can't utilize it. So all these protein powders that have fillers that are filled with garbage, you're not actually absorbing that. So it's just going to waste. You want to truly recover. You want to make sure that you're having these protein shakes, high quality, post-workout, and you're really, really vetting the product that you're putting in your body.
Is there a particular brand or like type that you recommend? Is there?
Right. So it's an interesting question. And again, this is athlete specific. So if we're looking at the type of whey protein that's needed in general, grass-fed whey by Momentous is my number one recommendation. I had worked with their team at UCLA. I had brought them in and all our athletes used it. I saw tremendous results from all our athletes with that particular product. However, one thing that I really like to emphasize is the rotation of different types of proteins. So you got to think, if you're consuming the same type of protein every single time that you train over the course of 4 years or 5 years, your body is going to become really accustomed to it. And it's going to be almost like going in and bench pressing every time that you do an upper body workout. At some point, there are going to be diminishing returns. So you want to make sure that you're giving your body a slight rotation of protein or a slight rotation of amino acids in order to get the most benefit out of it. In addition to that, there are some athletes that are going to be sensitive or allergic to whey protein. It's pretty common. You'll find that you have diarrhea, you have a stomachache every time you drink it. So what you want to avoid is continuing to have it if your body isn't reacting well. And the best way to, evaluate whether a product is working well or not is if you feel like crap afterwards, then it's probably not going to be the best product for you. And there are other options. So when it comes to other options for whey protein, you want to look at essential amino acids. You want to look at a beef protein, which is becoming more and more popular. You want to look at a goat whey protein. And research has shown that and I haven't seen this in the market yet, it's kind of crazy, but even a chicken-based protein is going to have the same impact as a traditional whey protein. What I would recommend avoiding is a plant-based product, and that's becoming more and more popular, but especially for athletes, what's been shown is that the leucine content in the plant-based protein is not as high as those of the animal-based protein, and leucine is one of the amino acids, and that's the driver of muscle protein synthesis. So in order to optimize what you're doing, you want to make sure the leucine content is really, really high, and you can even supplement leucine in a protein shake on top of whatever whey protein you're bringing in.
Yeah. So for me personally, what I found was that I didn't really react too well to whey. So I've always been try to look for like alternate options, and I found that like an egg-based protein has worked really well for me. Like kind of like, I don't really know. It's like an egg, like I guess like egg white-based protein powder. I guess it's like.
Yeah, I mean that's okay. I mean, I don't know if the amino acid profile is as good as the true essential amino acid. I would recommend, at least if you're going to do that, I would recommend rotating it on a regular basis. So have your egg have an essential amino acid. Yeah. Have goat whey. Goat whey is a really good option. And if you get it's from Terra's, and if you get a vanilla flavor, it doesn't taste bad. It just kind of tastes like nothing. You put it in a shake with, fruit or something else, you mix it up and you're good. That's not going to have as big an impact on your digestive system because goat milk is actually very similar to baby's milk. So the human body is used to it, and it can uptake that a little bit at a higher rate than somebody who's sensitive to the whey protein. And a lot of people are. It's pretty common.
Yeah. And then in terms of, like training, for me, I found that I have this problem where when I'm sprinting, right, sometimes it's hard for me to transfer like knee drive from because I squat a lot of weight, but I usually have this problem where sometimes it's hard to transfer like a powerful knee drive when I'm sprinting, where it's like I'm not like transferring the like the squat where it's like up and you drive your knee up in like that drive phase. So you have any recommendations for like something I can do to improve that aspect of like my agility?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when it comes to sprinting, we first have to define what sprinting is. And sprinting is the use of the anaerobic system using ATP, which is going to be about 6 total seconds of output. And a lot of times there's some confusion about what sprinting is. Sprinting is not sprinting for 50, 100 yards and trying to figure out, how tired you can get. Sprinting is going to take a very short period of time. So generally what I recommend first is 2 sets of 4 by 10 yards is going to be the best volume, total volume, to enhance sprint output and sprint quality. right? So the first 10 yards is really going to be a demonstration of your strength. So if we look at that as a starting point, then we know that what you're doing in the weight room is transferring. When it comes to knee drive or any limitation in any specific sprint technique, you want to address it as a motor quality in sprinting, but you also want to check that your range of motion is adequate in a passive and active range of motion table test. So if your range of motion is limited in, let's say, knee flexion, so that point where your knee is coming all the way up and you're having that bend, and you can't get there to begin with, but you're trying to achieve that during sprinting, it's obviously going to be a really big issue. And that could be either neurological or it could be muscular. And you don't know which one unless you do some testing on it. And that's where I like to utilize progressive and regressive angular isometrics to really specifically address that type of issue. Because first we have to figure out where your range of motion is lacking, why it's lacking, and then we have to put together a protocol to address that. So a lot of times you see squat patterns that are really good, but there could be something deficient. So if you gave me like LeBron James, for example, there's not a lot of issues with LeBron James, but what we can do is try to find LeBron James's weakest link, because I guarantee you, especially at 36 years old, he has a weakest link, and you can attack that to help improve performance. So for you, Ben, if you're lacking knee flexion, we can look at that on a table test. Then we can figure out exactly what we need to do to address that. And if you're able to get more knee flexion in a passive and active range of motion, then I can guarantee you that when you go back and you try to sprint, you're going to be able to take your body through that range of motion. The nervous system, if it isn't exposed to these end ranges or these drastic ranges of motion, then it's not going to be able to go there when it needs to. In addition to that, this ties over really, really well to injury risk. So again, if you're not taking your body through a full range of motion, and it doesn't have to do with necessarily squatting, it doesn't have to necessarily do with any exercise in particular, but if you're not going through a full range of motion, and then you're required to at a very quick, unexpected moment, what's going to happen? The load is going to exceed the capacity of the body, and that's where you're going to see an injury. And that's pretty clear what happened in the NFL this year, was that a lot of people weren't training at the capacity that they needed to from a joint-specific perspective, and you see these ACL tears when the knee just can't handle the load. And it's not because they did anything wrong, but the training program was probably not intended to do specifically what it needed to do for that individual. So you have to, again, it goes back to testing. You have to get it tested or you don't know. You have no idea what your weakest link is in your upper body unless you test it. Unless you're tracking your numbers in training, unless you're looking at this whole structural balance component, you're not going to be able to identify where your weak link is.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. To me, to begin with, I should have went out and gotten like some numbers earlier. I did some testing recently, and I've been working with a trainer to work on my sprint technique and that kind of stuff. But I feel like it's crucial for young athletes coming into high school to get those testing done early, like you said, when they're coming in as freshmen. But I have one more final question for you. It's really hard to leave a D1 job as a strength and conditioning coach and then form your own, private sector type of thing. Do you feel like you've made the right decision so far? And what's next for you as you continue to study and get your second master's and continue your path in this private sector?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, it wasn't hard because I think when you're at the Division I level and you literally lived out my dream. All I talked about, if you asked any of my classmates at Springfield, literally every single day, what I talked about was like, hey man, I want to get back to UCLA. And I could have never imagined in my wildest dreams that I would have been able to stay on as the performance nutrition coordinator for Chip Kelly. Like that wasn't even in my stratosphere at the time, but I knew if I worked hard and I invested in myself, I invested in my knowledge, and I continued to do that, then I'd be in a really great position to be successful at wherever I ended up. I interviewed for a head strength job just before I went back to UCLA for the second time, and I didn't get it. They said, you're going to be here, but we know this is a stepping stone for you. And to be honest, it was. So I was fine going back to UCLA, and I did it. Like I did everything that I wanted to do. And there were times where I went back, I wasn't getting paid, and I really, really wanted to quit. It was hard. It was grueling. You're frustrated because you think you have all this knowledge. You just got your master's degree at Springfield, and you're this great. Like, no, man, it still takes a bunch of work, and you still have to have that mindset to continue to be consistent, continue to grind. But I felt comfortable and at ease when I left. I told them, I walked into the office. It was after the USC game, and I said, hey, hey man, I'm going to go to school and get my chiropractic degree. And I never looked back. I never thought twice about it, because I know that if I have more knowledge, I'm going to be able to help a greater amount of people. And that's going to be really, really rewarding long term. And if I want to go back, I'm fully confident I can get a job anywhere I want when I'm done. But is that necessarily what I want to do? From a lifestyle standpoint, you have to look at it as well, because now you're looking at, hey, I'm going to have a family. You know, the hours that are taken up in college athletics and in pro athletics aren't always conducive to that. They're not very welcoming to that. And you have to be on call nonstop. And right now, I'm in charge of everything. You know, I make my own call when I think it's right. It's interesting. We had an athlete named Josh Kelly, and he's on the Chargers right now, number 27, got drafted last year in the 3rd round, I believe. So Josh went to Cal Davis. And if you know California schools, that's a really small school. It's not really heard of. I don't know what it is, even right now, talking about it. But he came to UCLA every single day, hit up our running back coach, Deshaun Foster, every single day, said, hey, give me a shot. Give me a shot. When he came in 2017 to our team, Deshaun let him on as a walk-on. He never went a day without smiling, without being the happiest person in the world. Fast forward 2 years later, there were points in the 3rd game of our season where he wasn't getting any playing time, but he would come in every single day smiling, being happy, busting his ass. You know, one thing happens, another thing happens. He's the starting running back by game 6. We get to the USC game, and he has a breakout game. Following year, he gets drafted. Coach Kelly talked about him as being one of the guys where he put stock in himself, and I'm willing to do the same thing. I put all the stock in the world in myself, because quite frankly, I don't think there's a better coach out there. I really believe that. I put so much time, and I put 13 years in. I've learned from the best people. I'm continuing to learn. And all this is going to culminate into a really, really unique situation where I'm going to have the ability to do manual therapy, to do adjustments, to do clinical nutrition, and put it together in a training and performance format that's digestible for young athletes, digestible for the general population. So I'm not even looking too far ahead. I'm taking it one day at a time. And right now, I have this great company, and I've been able to work with a lot of high school athletes, and I have a huge impact on their life. So I'm really, really happy doing that. As crazy as it seems being at UCLA and seeing how nice it is, there's nothing like being able to work with high school athletes and develop them over a 4-year period. You're going to be able to get so much out of it, and it's so rewarding. And I really mean that. It's so rewarding to be able to do. At the same time, you know, it is kind of frustrating because you see a lot of just straight up garbage training. People who've done it for 3 months. They just got their training certification. Now all of a sudden they're supposed to be a reliable source of information, and people don't know that. So it's tough to tell one thing from another. But I'm trying to provide a reliable resource for high school athletes, for people in general, and just give an opportunity to learn and understand that there's a really evidence-based way to do things, and taking into consideration the research, the values of the athlete who I'm working with, or the person I'm working with, and putting that together is going to be a really strong way to professionalize what we're doing and change the game. So that's always the goal.
Yeah. It's really hard to find like good advice online and all this kind of stuff. It doesn't really, like, good actual factual information doesn't really come easily to high school athletes. Now I find that it's hard to find this type of information nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, on Instagram, I see high school athletes on Instagram. I hate social media, man, but I went on it because, I'd be able to interact with more high school athletes. That's the reality of it. And the amount of stimuli that are on there where you scroll through and you see everything and you see what the pros are doing, which 99% of the time is absolutely in no way, shape, or form any reflection of what a high school athlete should be doing in any way. And this idea that because Tom Brady or Odell or whoever is doing it a certain way, that you should do what they're doing, that is absolutely the wrong thing to do. So, hey, it's confusing. You Google what you ask some of the questions that you asked to me on Google, and your head will literally be spinning because there will be so much contradictory information. It's so frustrating, but it's like, hey man, how do I find a reliable source? And you have your GNC experts, you have your personal trainers, where there's absolutely no standard in personal training. Like you can be right out of high school and get your personal training certification. Now all of a sudden you're a certified personal trainer. And that's supposed to be a reliable way to find who you're working with. Even people with master's degrees, that's not any good representation that you know what you're doing from a coaching standpoint. But this whole combination of in the trenches experience, formal education, with which, in my opinion, people should respect formal education. It's not really given as much respect, especially in this industry, as it should be. And then being able to put it all together and show results, show that you got results with people, is a really good way to evaluate who you're working with. So, it's interesting. It's a little frustrating, but there's nothing you can do. All I can do is set the standard and put out a great product and show people, and hopefully that goes a long way in and of itself.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on. I've really learned a lot from you today. And these are definitely things that I'll take into consideration as I continue training and getting ready for college.
Nice. Yeah, good luck. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
All right, take care.
All right, you too. Thanks, Ben.
No problem. Sam, UCLA assistant strength coach, I don't know if I could quit that kind of job, being at a D1 school and then coming out and starting your own company. I mean, it really takes guts to be able to do something like that. I mean, you think about trying to do that, start your own company and just like start from the ground up. You're already there. Like you're almost there. It's like you're at the D1 level. You're training top-notch level kids. And it's like you're training all those D1 kids and now you have to start over with high school kids. But if you know what your purpose and your mission in life is, and I think Sam's calling is to set a standard for what high school kids should be doing in athletics, and he's trying to train them to do things the right way. I think that is very important and critical because he knows what he wants and he knows what his calling is, and his calling is to help high school kids realize what true training, nutrition, and doing things that are actually beneficial to them and not just garbage training like you mentioned. So thank you guys for watching. Make sure you hit subscribe, like the video, subscribe to the Modern Athlete Podcast, listen to us on Spotify, cop the merch, and I'll see you guys in next week's episode. Peace.